Metroid Prime 4 is a real game, and it's called Beyond.
Beyond!
Yes, we know it's been real for like 7 years now because Nintendo made the big-brained decision not to give the game to Retro Studios from the start, so it took longer than it should have. Bitterness aside, it's great that we finally have gameplay, and as expected, it looks exactly like a Metroid Prime game, which is what I've wanted for 17 years. I didn't need this game to reinvent the wheel like Breath of the Wild did, I just wanted a new Metroid Prime game similar to the ones I played when I was a wee lad. However, I do have a list of things I want to see in Metroid Prime 4, as well as some things not related to the game itself, but more related to the pre-release strategy of the game to help ensure it sells better. Let's start with some game-specific features I want to see. Of course, if none of these were to show up in the final game, I'd be okay with that as long as Metroid Prime 4 is just good. That's really all we can ask for. This is mostly a list of little things I'd love to see sprinkled in there, starting with my first wish. Samus needs to throw hands. As demonstrated by the last few Metroid games, yes, even Other M, Samus is more than just a tank that shoots things with her arm cannon. She is an absolute beast in combat, hitting enemies, kicking them, and putting them in headlocks, even the giant ones, which I'm sure is a benefit from that Chozo DNA enhancing her strength. Samus's moves were the best in Metroid Dread, to the point where it made returning to older Metroids a bit tougher. Not that much though, because they still rock. I would love it if Retro Studios could appropriately adapt Samus's close quarters combat into the first person. From what we've seen of this gameplay snippet, it looks like shooting might be her primary attack, which is fine, although it's possible they could have hidden some melee attacks from us in the trailer. Heck, maybe they could come later in the form of new powers. That may sound silly at first, but Zero Mission made ledge grabbing a freaking power-up, so anything could happen. Now my next wish is something I think could greatly add to the immersion of Metroid Prime 4. Audio logs. Imagine scanning the corpse of a Galactic Federation trooper and it unlocks a recording saying something like,
"Captain's log. Minus the captain. I'm not one yet. I'm doing some recon on this strange planet. I found an alien life form. Looks dangerous as shit. I'm gonna go pet it. I'll be right back. Like and subscribe."
Audio logs like this have existed in games for a long time, mainly populating the immersive sim genre with games like System Shock and BioShock, but they've made their way into action-adventure games and RPGs, adding a sense of immersion that makes the game world feel more real. As we know, Metroid is all about immersion, and adding audio logs from various species as collectibles would make the world feel all the more lived in. Though you could argue this goes against the isolation element of Metroid, and having a chatty recording blasting in your ears while playing would make the experience feel less lonesome. Still, the game supposedly begins with a space pirate invasion, so I don't think it's going to be as isolating as other entries in the series. In conclusion, let me hear those sweet, sweet audio logs. But you know what I want to hear more than the last words of a dying space marine? I want to hear the greatest Metroid soundtrack of all time. Now you might think I'm getting a little too carried away, but I don't think so, especially after hearing 20 seconds of this one song. Nice. Okay, to be more realistic, there's no telling if Metroid Prime 4 will have the best soundtrack in the series, and if I were to adjust my expectations, I just want it to sound better than Metroid Dread. Like, the music wasn't bad, just painfully underwhelming in a franchise with fantastic atmospheric scores. The Prime Trilogy has some of my favorite game music of all time, composed by Kenji Yamamoto. No, not the Dragon Ball composer. Who could forget the chilling, calming sounds of the Phendrana Drifts theme, or the epic boss music of Rundus? These are some of my favorites, but none of them hold a candle to Torvus Bog. We don't know yet if Kenji Yamamoto is returning to Metroid Prime 4, but this musical snippet makes me think he is because it sounds unmistakably like his style. It's already crazy that we're getting a new Metroid Prime game 18 years later, and the thought of getting another great soundtrack out of it just makes my heart happy. Remember when I said I wouldn't be upset if none of my Metroid Prime 4 wishes came true? Well, I lied, because I demand the return of Samus Aran's voice actor, Jennifer Hale. I know what you're thinking. All Jennifer Hale said in these games were, While she did have a cut opening monologue in the first game, only her grunts and screams were used in the entire trilogy, with Samus's death scream being performed by Vanessa Marshall. Even still, when you have the opportunity to cast Jennifer Hale in your project, you cast Jennifer Hale in your project. She is one of the most prolific video game voice actors, with numerous roles like Commander Shepard in Mass Effect, Rivet in Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, and now she's the voice of Bayonetta.
Greedy little thing. Perhaps it's time for a crash diet.
Not to mention Samus is an iconic character herself, so I would love to see Hale return to the role in Prime 4, even if it's just for grunts and stuff. And it sounds like that's what's happening, because in the trailer you can kind of hear one of her original grunts from the Prime trilogy. Although I would like it if they gave her more than just that. Though Samus is quiet in most of the Metroid games excluding Other M, she isn't a silent protagonist by any means. She has opening narration in a few games, albeit through text, but she also had moments with other characters like that little argument with Adam in Fusion, and this mic drop in Dread. Jennifer Hale could have significant scenes like this in Prime 4. Maybe a little snarky exchange with Sylux, perhaps?
Ha! You're not even good enough to be
I'll make you eat those words!
In fact, when rumors of the Metroid Prime trilogy on Switch popped up again in 2021, she tweeted, "Okay, when do we start?" Makes me think she's ready to put that Various suit on once again. Oh, speaking of the Metroid Prime trilogy, we need to see that on Switch before Prime 4 comes out. We already have 1/3 of the trilogy in the form of Metroid Prime Remastered, but what about 2 and 3? Maybe they won't be necessary to play since Prime 4 appears to be the start of a new trilogy with a new story, but there's still a 4 in the title. A lot of people are going to see that 4 and immediately be turned off thinking they need to play the other games beforehand. I gotta think Nintendo knows this and is planning Switch releases of Metroid Prime 2 and 3. After all, they put the first 3 Pikmin games on Switch before 4 came out, and then 4 became the best-selling Pikmin game. Surely a similar thing could happen with Prime 4 by releasing 2 and 3 at least a month before, no? And if we were to go by the many years of rumors, it could be that Prime 2 and 3 won't get the same remastered treatment as the first game, and will instead get upscaled ports of the originals like with Pikmin 1 and 2. I would not mind this, especially if they're priced correctly and maybe in a bundled package. The games already look gorgeous on their original hardware, and bringing them up to HD would make them look even better. I know this would be disappointing to some fans given how amazing Prime Remastered looks, but come on y'all, Metroid Prime 4 is around the corner. We don't have time to be disappointed. Let's just be happy we're soaking in all the Metroid goodness next year. And this last wish of mine is a bit controversial, but I don't care. I don't want to wait until the Switch 2 comes out to play Metroid Prime 4. Instead, release it on Switch 1 first, and then release an enhanced port or an enhanced backwards compatibility update on Switch 2 later. Bite me. This game was announced over 7 freaking years ago for Switch 1, and waiting to play the best version of that game on Switch 2 would frankly just be annoying. It was announced for Switch, therefore you release it on Switch without the distraction of a new console. Is this a selfish wish? Absolutely, but I think there's some good reasoning behind it. I've heard many people say that Metroid Prime 4 could be like a Breath of the Wild situation, where that game was released on both the Wii U and Switch at the same time. And I get why people think Prime 4 could pull off the same strategy from Switch 1 to 2, but there are a few key details we're missing here. For one, Metroid is not as popular as Zelda, so it's already not as enticing of a launch title. Nintendo is going to want to launch the Switch 2 with an exciting exclusive like a new 3D Mario or Mario Kart, not an upscaled Switch 1 game like Metroid Prime 4. Let's also not forget Breath of the Wild had to be released on Switch because the Wii U was an utter failure. So Nintendo had to fast track the release of Switch, making the game pointless to launch only on Wii U. Fast forward to today, Switch is the 3rd best-selling game console ever, and Nintendo is taking their sweet old time announcing that successor. And I'm theorizing it's going to come out closer to the holiday season in 2025, which gives plenty of time for Metroid Prime 4 to release on Switch 1 before then as somewhat of a swan song to the console. And then they can release Metroid Prime 4 Beyond Deluxe Definitive Edition with a new funky mode. I could go on about why Metroid Prime 4 should first release on Switch before Switch 2, but instead, I'm gonna make a bet with you today. If it does release on Switch 1 first, like I'm predicting, you have to buy me Metroid Prime 4. But if it does dual release on Switch 1 and Switch 2, you have to buy me Metroid Prime 4 and a Switch 2. Better start saving up now.